Beijing's subway didn't just lose money, it incinerated 240 billion yuan in a single year. Shenzhen? Down 33.6 billion. That's not a slowdown, that's a collapse in motion. So ask yourself honestly, do you still believe in the old narrative of a trillion-yuan subway gold rush? Because right now, Shenzhen alone is bleeding close to 100 million yuan every single day. Cities like Kunming and Lanzhou are struggling just to pay staff. In Foshan, trains stop early, and air conditioning shuts off before passengers even leave. Across China, 54 subway systems are buried under a staggering 4.7 trillion yuan debt. And when you stand inside some of these stations surrounded by silence and emptiness, one question hits hard. Was this long-term vision or a slow-motion financial disaster? Take a look at one of Fujian's most desolate subway stations. It stands in the middle of nowhere. Fields, abandoned lots, half-finished buildings. Roads are empty, traffic non-existent. The entrance alone likely cost hundreds of millions of yuan to build, yet hours pass without a single passenger walking through. Not one. No clear explanation, no visible demand, just a massive structure waiting for a purpose that never came. It feels less like infrastructure and more like a monument to overconfidence. And it's not an isolated case. In one city, a subway operator admitted it owed over 200 million yuan in unpaid wages to new employees. In another, entire lines shut down early each night just to cut electricity costs. These aren't minor inefficiencies, they're warning signals. Because behind every darkened station and silent platform lies the same brutal reality. A system built on assumptions that no longer hold. Look at Nanjing. Some stations are so empty they feel frozen in time. In Nanning, a station once praised as the most beautiful sits nearly unused, as if aesthetics replaced practicality. In Chengdu, you step out of certain stations into pure emptiness. No buildings, no shops, not even a gas station. Just wind and dust. During the day, it feels strange. At night, it feels unsettling. Why build massive transit hubs in places where no one lives, no one works, and no one goes? Inside, the situation is just as surreal. Staff often outnumber passengers. Platforms remain empty even during what should be peak hours. If the employees weren't there, you might think the station had already been abandoned. It's not just underused, it's eerily lifeless. For decades, China's development model was driven by relentless construction. Cities raced to expand subway networks, competing for scale, speed, and prestige. Local governments fought to secure projects, believing infrastructure would unlock growth. In Shandong, one city even planned 18 high-speed rail stations, an ambition so extreme it echoed the excesses of past political campaigns. But today, the results are undeniable. The system is cracking under its own weight. At least 26 major cities are now operating subways at a loss. Many lines run through areas with minimal population, surrounded by empty land or stalled real estate projects. What was supposed to connect thriving urban zones now cuts through silence. The deeper issue isn't just transportation, it's the collapse of the financial logic behind it. Shenzhen is the perfect example. Once hailed as the most profitable subway system in the country, it was called the Money King. For years, it generated over 10 billion yuan annually. But in 2024, everything flipped. A 33.6 billion yuan loss wiped out 5 years of profits and pushed the company into a massive deficit. And here's the key point. Shenzhen isn't the exception, it's the trend. Ride Line 10 in the afternoon from Futian Port, then transfer to Line 1 toward Luohu. What you'll notice isn't congestion, it's quiet. Stations that once buzzed with activity now feel subdued. On newer lines, the emptiness is even more obvious. Some stops open into barren landscapes, with construction still incomplete and surrounding areas barely developed. After dark, the isolation becomes almost tangible. In Shijiazhuang, certain stations are surrounded by wilderness. In Zhengzhou, natural terrain stretches endlessly around subway exits. In Wuhan, once busy underground shopping streets have faded into silence. Stores sit closed, corridors echo with emptiness, and entire commercial zones feel abandoned. It's not just ridership that's declining, it's the ecosystem that was supposed to grow around it. Then there's Lushou's infamous Green Ghost project. It once promised 7 lines and over 200 kilometers of track, backed by massive early investment. But the project rushed forward without proper approval, driven by urgency rather than sustainability. Today, it's stalled, underfunded, and widely seen as a cautionary tale. Experts warn that even if completed, the system would struggle to cover its operating costs. Yunnan's subway tells a similar story. After more than a decade of construction, only a fraction of the network is complete, and it's already facing serious problems. Funding gaps, technical setbacks, and shifting policies have turned what was meant to be a long-term asset into a prolonged burden. Even in cities known for heavy traffic, the numbers don't add up. In Chongqing, stations designed to handle massive crowds often sit half-empty. The infrastructure exists, but the demand doesn't match. So why keep building? Because for years, subways weren't really about transportation. They were part of a much larger economic machine. The formula was simple: build a subway line, increase nearby land values, sell real estate, and use those profits to offset transit losses. It worked. Until it didn't. Take Shenzhen again. In 1 year, ticket revenue brought in 3.6 billion yuan. Real estate, however, generated 16 billion. That tells you everything. Subway companies weren't just transit operators, they were property developers in disguise. The trains moved people, but the real money came from land. Now that China's real estate market is struggling, that entire model has broken down. Without rising land prices and strong property sales, the financial foundation collapses. What's left is a system that can't sustain itself on ticket revenue alone. There's also the GDP logic. For years, it was believed that every 100 million yuan invested in subway construction could drive over 260 million yuan in economic output. Cities embraced this idea, expanding networks to boost growth figures and attract investment. But GDP gains don't always translate into sustainable income, and now the gap is showing. Then there's the political factor. Subways became symbols of modernity, progress, and prestige. Cities wanted them not just for function, but for image. Building a subway meant joining the ranks of advanced urban centers. But once projects were approved and constructed, the officials responsible often moved on, leaving behind massive debt for others to manage. The result? A nationwide pattern of overbuilding. Many cities knew from the start that ridership might fall short, but the pressure to develop, to compete, to show progress, it overrode caution. And now, the consequences are catching up. Walk through some of Guangdong's most visually striking subway entrances today, and you'll notice something unsettling. Beautiful designs, modern architecture, and nothing around them. No crowds, no traffic, no activity, just empty space. The vision of future growth hasn't materialized. In Nanjing, some of the most remote stations sit surrounded by wild vegetation. In Shaoxing, stations remain unopened, hidden among forests. In Jiangsu, certain stops overlook vast farmland with barely a single person in sight. It raises a difficult question. Is infrastructure being built for today's needs, or for a future that may never arrive? Even in major cities like Shanghai, changes are visible. Lines that were once packed during peak hours now feel less crowded. The intensity has faded. The system still functions, but the demand is no longer what it used to be. And then you have places like Dongzhuang Station in Shijiazhuang, nicknamed the loneliest subway stop. Wind moves through the weeds, roads lead nowhere, and silence dominates the landscape. It stands in sharp contrast to the crowded city centers these systems were meant to support. This pattern, massive construction followed by financial strain, isn't new, but the scale is unprecedented. When China now has dozens of cities operating or building subway systems, with total debt exceeding 4.7 trillion yuan. Industry insiders report that most systems are running at a loss, with financial pressures mounting each year. As local government budgets tighten, subsidies become harder to maintain, and without subsidies, many systems simply can't survive. Some cities may be forced to reduce services, delay expansions, or even shut down stations entirely. Names like Kunming, Nanning, Suzhou, and Guiyang are already being discussed as potential flashpoints. Beijing's numbers are particularly striking. Annual ticket revenue sits at around 6.8 billion yuan, while operating costs exceed 20 billion. Without government support, losses would reach nearly 14 billion per year. That's the equivalent of burning through 1 billion yuan every couple of days. Zhengzhou faces similar challenges, with billions in annual losses even after subsidies. In Lanzhou, rising debt levels have led to delayed salary payments. Across cities like Guangzhou, Xi'an, Chongqing, and Chengdu, the pattern repeats: high costs, low returns, growing pressure. Nationally, subway-related corporate debt has quietly climbed past 4.7 trillion yuan, a number so large it's difficult to fully grasp. It represents not just financial strain, but a turning point. The era of rapid subway expansion is coming to an end. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The debt doesn't disappear. It doesn't resolve itself. Someone has to pay. And ultimately, that burden falls on the public. Government revenue comes from taxes. Losses are absorbed through subsidies. And when debt is pushed forward, it doesn't vanish. It shifts into the future. That means the cost of today's decisions may be carried by the next generation. What was once framed as progress and ambition is now raising deeper questions about sustainability, accountability, and long-term planning. So the next time you step into a vast, empty subway station, echoing, silent, waiting, you might ask yourself, is this a gateway to the future? Or a reminder of a promise that never arrived?